Are we live?
You are all set.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. Welcome to this special ordinance workshop of whatever day it is, January 7th, 2021, Thursday. I talked to both of my cohorts in the ordinance committee over the holidays, and we decided that we should at least get something going on growth management ordinance, even though it ties in obviously very closely to the other things that we're doing. But let's at least start with a higher level discussion so that we know where we may be heading. And I really appreciate the fact that Diane and Kristen are willing to be here from the school board. I know you guys have a school board meeting tonight. What time's your meeting?
Not till 7. So, you know.
Oh, no, I'm not meeting until 7. So don't worry about that. I just
day.
wanted to make sure.
I
I'm
can see this
not,
going.
so we're
You
good.
can
I just want to make sure. And what I would like to do, since I don't, oh, wait, I see one attendee. Let me just check to see who that, it's Rocky. So I will just put out there, Mr. Rizbara, that I do allow the public to make 3-minute comment at the beginning of the ordinance. So I don't know, is there anything you'd like to say? If there is, put your hand up and we'll bring you in for. No, I don't see any hands going up.
That will be coming.
No, hold on. Wait a minute. I'm waiting. 10, 9, 8. Okay, I don't see any hands, so I guess we're good on that. So let's move forward. I want to keep this somewhat structured, but obviously I want people to weigh in, and hopefully everyone got the questions. This is Jean Marie, the former teacher, kicking in here with you. And just to reiterate, I asked you to think about how you would define growth, the difference between density and intensity. What do you think works well about the GMO? And I'll call it GMO. What does not? And then the last one is, any thoughts, questions, whatever. So what I would like to do is start with giving just a brief definition of what you think growth is. And I'm going to go around the way I see you guys. So Mr. Hamill, you're number 1. Yeah.
Well, growth, I mean, so I would define that as, in this context, we're focused primarily on, residential growth. But I think we need to, keep in mind commercial side as well. I think those both have an impact on pace and intensity.
Okay. How do you define it though? What is growth to you?
For growth for me is just number of dwellings and square footage, that we that is built and occupied each year, and the associated impact on services is how I would define it.
Okay, cool. Well, Ken Johnson, why are you as now you say Don Hamill on is your name? That's all right. That's because you probably came in on Don's link. Don't worry about it. Ken knows why I'm picking on him.
Oh, that's right. I sent him my invite. So.
Don't worry about it. Go ahead, Ken. You're muted, dear.
I said, for this meeting, I'm going to stay Don Hamill. Thank you very much.
That's fine.
Two-headed monster.
So my definition of growth, and I'm really hoping this is the intent of this meeting, because this was the charge from the town council, is residential growth, not commercial growth. GMO is residential only, not commercial. Okay, so my definition of growth is, again, in relationship to this meeting and the charge from the town council, is new development growth. It's not migration growth. It's not new birth growth. It's new development.
You mean by units, i.e. houses
Well, I
or
really
whatever?
don't like to call them units. You know,
Okay.
I think we have really sanitized home, our residents to the point of a unit. Dwellings. Yes.
Okay.
I will call them a dwelling. And a dwelling can be a condo, a manufactured home, a K apartment.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, awesome. Kristen, if you don't mind me picking on you.
No,
Did
I don't
you-
mind you picking on me.
Did you get these questions?
I did get them.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
And I think, in terms of your discussion, I don't have anything much to add. I agree with Don and Ken. It
Okay.
increased the number of units. Obviously, from our perspective on the school side, growth, the implications of that growth would come in terms of students.
Okay. So you would look at it from the implications of population of students.
School, yeah.
Okay, I'm scribbling as I do this. Diane?
So my answer, that's exactly what I was going to say is, when I think about growth as it relates to the school district, I think about the increase in our student population. And so, again, I think our previous conversations, when we look at the different housing structures that people live in, and, how many individuals are residing in each of those, that's the impact on the district.
Okay. Tom? Mr. Hall?
At the risk of alienating myself from my counselors, no.
Uh-oh.
That would never happen.
No, I guess for me, it's the gain year over year. And for me, I do draw a distinction between, I think dwelling is too broad a term. I think different types of residential units have different impacts. And so I think we're all very concerned about the impacts that come from growth. That's probably what really draws us, the glue that holds us all together. And we're doing some analysis, and I hope to be able to share that with you shortly, but I really do see a distinction among the different types of residential uses. So I don't think all residential growth is bad necessarily. I think some are actually a net positive to the town. And so I think requiring some further level of analysis is really going to be helpful in this discussion.
How do you define growth, though, in the context of this?
I guess I don't have anything further to add. Growth to me is really a measurement year over year.
Okay.
What's occurred.
Okay. All right. Karen? I feel like I'm back at school. Karen? Ms. Martin?
Hopefully this is the only question.
Yeah. Sorry. Did you do your homework? I don't want to hear any excuses. No.
Like Tom, for me, the word growth is neutral until you put it into context. It's really the impacts of growth that of different measures of growth that make sense. And so, for me, sometimes I like to go to what can we measure? And that's usually the physical, the housing units, the population, those things that are measured really by both a combination of the census, American Community Survey, and then what we see on the ground, and sort of comparing that with permitting and things like that to make sure those data points are solid. But there's so many aspects of growth, and particularly when you're talking about jobs, for instance. Tom talks about a change, there could be the annual change, but there are things that happen really within a year and within the different sectors that really account for change. So sometimes growth really isn't growth, it's just a change in the components of it. So that's why the demographics is so important. That's why when we talk about students, we can say, hey, the student population may be not changing very much, but what we do with those students are changing. and that's having an impact and perhaps raising the price per student. So all of that's a long way of saying, I think we have to look under the hood when we start talking about the numbers and we start talking about growth. But again, Don's right, the easy parts are looking at housing units, population, employment. But I think we have to link each of those leading indicators to some type of health statistic, if you will. You know, what does it mean when our population increases? There's some good economic benefits, and then there's some cost to the community. So I'll stop there rather than
Okay,
going on and on.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, just pairing growth indicators with what you're trying to
Sure.
measure.
okay. Last but not least, Mr. Chase.
Wait,
You're,
Jay,
you're,
You both got
I know, it's easy to do.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying I don't have a whole lot more to offer. I think you know, in the simple sort of context, growth is really looking as, I think it was Tom who said, sort of year over year, how many, you know, new dwellings are added when we're talking in terms of the growth management ordinance. You know, typically when I first read the question, how do you define growth? I do, like Don, sort of go to growth, residential, commercial, natural resource, sort of look at the whole picture. But again, if we're focused on the GMO, I think it really is about, you know, added dwelling units over a given year. And then, as Karen was talking about, what do those indicators then mean for the community? So.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, you know me, and Chair will correct me. No, I think maybe we need to level set for a second. And I apologize. I've been communicating with April. Maybe the message wasn't translated. Because if you recall, back last December, we had a great workshop with the BOE and we talked about growth and enrollment. I thought it was a great workshop. And we did. We talked about migration enrollment, new birth enrollment, and development enrollment, new development enrollment.
Mhm.
This committee has been charged by the town council to look at our GMO ordinance, which is only new development, okay? So, and I know there was an exercise going on between the school and Jay that probably isn't done yet. It was gonna do by each grade level, just so we could get a sense on the impact of the schools. Although that's only
Johnson.
one factor.
Ken,
Ken? Yes.
I'm
You should.
sorry. I don't mean to
Okay.
cut you off.
I forgot where I
I'm
was.
going
For a
to.
second. I'm good.
I'm trying to keep this somewhat, and I haven't had a chance to answer yet. But no, I mean, Ken, I know where you want to go, and this is where we need to get there, is some more details and drawing the lines. But what I'm trying to do is get us to start, you know, at a higher level. Now, I will tell you that, you know, from my background, of course, is in real estate. And to me, growth is the development of private land by individuals, whether they be developers or just me alone or whomever, to put residential housing on for if we're talking about our growth management ordinance. And there is a balance, because to me, it's not just how many housing units that you're putting in a year, but it's also the residual impacts, i.e. school, roads, ability, you know, for employment opportunities for people. There's just, you know, it's sort of like, you know, you build a house and it's like the stone in the pond, and then you get these ripple effects that go out from that.
EMF, fire, library, all
right.
that. That's why
Yeah,
it's
right.
much larger than schools.
Oh, absolutely.
Schools are very
Absolutely.
important, though.
Right. And I don't like labeling any of it bad or good. I don't like, you know, those types of labels personally. But I agree with everything people have said. You know, we want to keep that in mind. But it's interesting because, and this is just me speaking here, is it seems that growth has gotten a dirty connotation in the last few years, and that's too bad. But again, you know, let's go on from that. The other thing that keeps coming up, and this is the next point that I had for you to think about, was the difference between density and intensity. And that's a tough one. Even I have a hard time. It's a good thing to think about. So I'm going to go right to the experts at the bottom of my screen. And this time I'm going to talk to Jay. Jay, you're a planner. What's the difference between density and intensity? Because there is a difference, I guess.
Yeah, there is a difference, but this isn't an easy one. But the way, you know, I think of it, and, you know, I think as I've sort of been looking at it, thinking about density is really sort of in the plainest terms, it's the number of units, and whatever the unit you're trying to count, whether it's people or dwellings or trees, whatever the case may be, that can go on a given land area. And so often when we talk about density in terms of our zoning ordinance, it's how many units do we allow per acre? 1 unit per acre, 5 units per acre, whatever the case may be. And so that's density. It's really sort of a mathematical equation almost, where intensity is really about sort of 3 different components. It's sort of the built area, or I should say sort of the development coverage, development area of a lot. There's the open space component to a lot, but then those are sort of the 2-dimensional pieces. But then I think of the 3-dimensional piece, which is really the building mass. You know, how is the size of the building, or the buildings, if you will. And so an example that I've thought of is, you could think of density as if you have a 10-acre plot of land and you're allowed to have 1 unit per acre, you could have 10 units on there, 10 dwellings, if you will. And so that could be, so that's density, that's how many are allowed. When you think of intensity, the intensity, that becomes the difference, where you could have 10 single-family dwellings spread out evenly across those 10 acres, so one house lot per acre, or you could have 1 large building that has 10 dwellings in it on 1 acre. So you have the same density, but the intensity of use is different. So that's sort of one example I've been thinking of this afternoon that helps sort of frame in my mind what the difference is.
Okay. Anyone want to add to that? Because that was one I kind of threw out there, knowing I was going to jump on Jay for the answer right away. Sorry, Jay. But Ken, if you could, yeah. Or Ken, go ahead.
Because as this was defined, I thought very eloquently by Councilor John Anderson, the way the council in this mindset is thinking of intensity is the pace of growth.
Right.
Okay. The density, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to be who I am. I need to qualify something, because I keep hearing this and it's very upsetting to me. So let's get the record straight. I don't know of anybody that is anti-growth on this council, not one person. I sure am not. I do believe the council brought forward this charge is because there's an awful lot of residents in this town that think there's too much going on too fast. That's all. End of story. So we've been looking into the details. We do not care if it's multifamily, condos, because I keep hearing that. And I really wish it would stop, because
so the concern, and you know, if I'm hearing you correctly, Ken, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you think that when you hear the terms density or intensity, you're thinking pace of growth.
Yes.
When you hear intensity, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's legit. Tom?
Well, just to qualify it though, our original GMO is 135 dwellings a year. Okay. Over time now, I think we hit 500 this year. Did we hit 500, Jay? We came pretty close. 400, close to 400 last year. High 300s the last year. I don't care where you went to school. That doesn't equal 135. And that was the original intent of our GMO. So, and I'll back off from that.
Okay, thank you for being you, Ken. Tom,
I was just going to offer a contrary opinion, only in that when I think of intensity, I don't think pace, I think location. I think about the concentration of activity in certain areas. So in my mind, and maybe it's because I'm kind of in the comp plan mindset, but I'm thinking about the growth areas where you're looking to really intensify your growth, particularly in those areas that can support it and you want it to occur. So I'm not saying I'm right. To me, the first thing to think of is location to pace. And I guess the other thing from if I could, the density piece, taking it a little differently, immediately what I think about is kind of affording housing choice and kind of maximizing development opportunity. Just allowing you to do more things on the same piece of land, if you will.
okay, Dawn.
Yeah, I not to kind of get off on a tangent, but building on the comments that Tom and Ken have made, and these various terms of intensity, pace, density. To me, it's also sort of how sustainable and how effective the growth and development is. In other words, are the services keeping pace with it? Whether it's school enrollments, traffic, mass transit, those sorts of things. I think people tend to look at the implications of the growth and development and react to that. I think that's why we're hearing static from the public about it. I think we could absorb a pretty good pace and intensity of growth, provided that the services keep up with it and are able to soften the blow and the negative aspects of growth. The sitting in traffic and having a hard time getting kids to and from school and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
That sustainability is a really interesting topic. Just in terms of there's qualitative measures and also quantitative. I think we've done a pretty good job across the school and town alike in terms of kind of living within our bricks and mortar. We're all getting stretched pretty thin. Some of the challenges, as I understand them on the school, have more to do with kind of turnover of existing housing stock as opposed to new development. And at least that was the last time we looked at it. That may change as we go forward. But that's an angle I think we ought to spend more time thinking about and measuring, right? What does it mean to be sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, when I heard, the first thing that came to my mind when Dawn was talking was chicken and egg too. It's like, you've got developers that want to develop, and to me, as Ken, you mentioned you fixed your name, as mentioned last night, and something we were talking about in council is, you've got people have the right to develop their land, and we were talking about that in a commercial. But as communities or states or whatever you want to call us, governments, we do put some limitations on it for whatever reason, but we got to be careful about the limitations because of private property rights, and that's a big thing in this country, is people have the right to do what they want with their land to a point.
We intend to adhere to all Maine state laws.
Right, exactly. So
But
we're right.
I'd like to follow up on something Tom mentioned, if you don't mind, though.
Well, can I finish and then you can go?
Absolutely.
It's just that, so then you get into, someone, they've got a great idea and they want to build, but then we've got these impacts on schools or roads or whatever. To me, it's sort of it's balancing that too. You can't always predict exactly what you're going to get for developers coming forward and what they're going to do. Thankfully, there is a process, so we get a chance to look at it. But schools are in and Diane and Kristen, if you wouldn't mind popping in with this, and Ken, you don't mind holding your thought for a second, right?
Go right ahead.
So we say, oh, sure, do this, do that, the other thing. And then then the kids start showing up at the schools. So what do the schools do? I mean, obviously when you build new schools or planning, I think you're planning for the potential of bubbles or bulges that come through. Diane,
I
Kristen?
mean, I think if we look at, our process last year, as we, consider our budget from year to year, we have been really looking at those enrollment projections. And up into the beginning of this pandemic, those have held really true over time. And so those help us to know what are the shifts that we need to make. And so if we think about the work that's happened in our schools, that would explain the reason why we've had to add portables at Pleasant Hill School, and we've had to add portables at Eight Corners School most recently, so that we can adjust to those shifts in enrollment. And I think, with this pandemic year, kind of having everything go, in many different directions, because there are lots of different choices that families having in education. We're really trying to plan ahead in terms of consider different scenarios for next year, because I don't think that we can just bank on our projections. And I also don't think we can just bank on our current numbers, right? And so we've got to really be creative in how we start thinking about that. And that's for next year. But to your point, as we think ahead, whether it be new housing or turning over existing housing and new families moving in to the community, how do we kind of, keep our thumb on that pulse so that we can anticipate, those kiddos that are going to arrive in 3, 4, 5 years. It might not be next year, right? But we have to be thinking ahead so that when they do arrive at the doorstep, we do have what we need to be able to address their needs.
Okay. Ken, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to you. Ken? Oh, you're muted.
You mean all that was wasted?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, folks. Again, I just try to want to level set a little bit. I think what it is I'm an elected official representing a lot of constituents. I listen to my constituents. A lot of folks talk about the pace of growth. Again, it's not the type of growth, but it gets back to what Don Hamill said and Tom alluded to. We have not kept our infrastructure up the pace of the growth. And that was the function of the GMO, to allow us to do that. My youngest granddaughter went to middle school this year. I'll never forget it. First time in, how's school? How was your first day of school? It was all right. And I said, I used to play pickleball in the middle school. So I thought we'd talk about the school. No, Grampy, I go to school in a trailer. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, no, I go to school in a trailer. So another example of our infrastructure not keeping up with the pace of growth, because we've let the growth way outpace our means for our infrastructure. I've had many discussions with the deputy chief of police that tells me they are running so thin, they can't even stop people from speeding anymore, because they're going from call to call to call because of our population. Again, meaning we haven't built out our police force to be able to accommodate the population. Same with a fire chief, a public chief. So my comment was, that's what the problem is. Our infrastructure is not keeping up with the growth. So you either tax everybody in the town to catch up, or you start managing that pace of growth until we catch up. And on that, I'll stop.
Well, and I wrote that down. I'm going to bring that back out after we go to the next topic, which what works well in this GMO.
Can I just correct Ken?
Oh, I'm
I
sorry. Go
wanna make-
ahead, Tom. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no,
go
just,
ahead.
no, just so you don't misspeak in the future.
Yes,
The sorry story about the middle school is the day we opened that brand new middle school,
Oh, yeah.
it was
It was too
undersized.
small.
And so there have
Oh,
been
correct.
modular since day one.
oh,
Your
correct,
point-
but all
your
schools
point-
have got them.
Your
All
point's well
schools have
taken.
got 'em.
Your point's well taken, but that was a function of state funding.
I
I
understand
was
that.
gonna say, yeah,
We
when the
couldn't build
state
out-
built,
Yeah, we couldn't build out what
When
we
the s-
needed. We had to build to the requirements. I think, yeah.
exactly, and that's, as much as people say they want state funding for their schools, be careful what you wish for. Because it can be pretty limiting. But anyway, so let's go on to what do you think works well? Ken, I'm gonna pick on you since you seem that, I know you've looked at a lot of the things that don't seem to be working well. Is there anything you like about the GMO right now?
I like the intent of the GMO. I've been in town 35 years. I remember when this GMO was implemented.
Yep.
It was implemented for the right reasons. It was to back the pressure off from the schools. And the state, town of Scarborough has every right under the state law to manage our pace of growth. I fully embrace and accept what you said about private property and builders developing. Nobody wants to stop that, but they have to play by the rules within the town they are building. That's all.
Yep.
So the intent of it, I really enjoyed. It was a smart document. What happened over time is it morphed into more of a high density management tool than anything else. We started fractionalizing our 135 permits a year up to, you could at least double those, right? Maybe even do more than that. So instead of building 135 homes a year, we were doing much more than that. And then we had a reserve pool originally to hold a certain amount of permits for affordable housing, because I think town of Scarborough does very stellar in its affordable housing. And we actually allot and special permits for that. But that over time turned into more of a slush fund. It's just not affordable 20. There's another bucket in there that under the discretion of the town council, they can add to it. And in 2017, they added 500 to it.
Well, not to the affordable.
No.
And maybe I missed where you.
Right.
you
So
were-
anyway, and not to get too lost, I've
Sure.
read the stuff inside out. I know it inside and out. The question was, what do I like about the GMO?
Yeah.
Current GMO, nothing. It's the most complicated documents I've ever read. I deal
Okay.
with federal regulations all day long, very complex regulations. Comes nowhere near what we built as a GMO in the town of Scarborough.
All right. So you don't like it at all. Dawn, I'm going to go to you. I might as well hear
Well-
my fellow members first.
Yeah, I think that, we have one, it's detailed. I think that we're very well intentioned in terms of how we tried to adjust it along the way to address pressures on growth and development. So I think it was, well intentioned, and I think the concepts that people were trying to accommodate by the revisions were the right ones. The actual impact of changes we've made to it over time, I think, have had unintended consequences. And I think that we are at the point now where we haven't really confirmed, what the effect of those things have been, other than we have never run out of, we've taken measures to make sure that we have accommodated the demand for development. I don't think that, we've really ever run out of building permits. Number one. Number two, I think that, I think the idea of the growth management ordinance is to try to meter and measure growth, and I don't believe it's done that. I think that there's still a big gap between what the demand is and what we're able to accommodate and manage effectively.
Okay. And I'm just going to throw in there, and I'm going to go to the rest of you. Just as someone, again, who's lived in town, I remember when they put this in, the growth management myself, because I've been around for a while, is I like it. I know that a lot of municipalities in the state have copied it. or were really impressed when we put it out. They use it, the way they want to use it, because every town has different needs. That's not to say things couldn't be tweaked in it, and I look at it from also, again, I'm looking at it with my real estate hat on, and I think it works pretty well for most developers or whatever, at least sets, the ground rules. So can I now, I'm just going to go around to the other folks. Diane, do you have an opinion on growth management ordinance as it's written, even from your looking with your school hat on?
I mean, I think for me, it's ensuring that we have adequate resources that match whatever agreements we make about the growth ordinance, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that goes beyond just the schools. I think I heard Ken say earlier, that's all other town services as well, right?
Yeah. Okay. Kristen.
Yeah, I would agree with what Diane said, and I don't know if that fits into the growth management ordinance or if it's a different piece of the puzzle where you actually, to make sure there's some evaluation of what's going on, because even if you're sitting, or whoever is evaluating all these growth permits, and you're just strictly looking at our enrollment numbers, that doesn't tell the whole picture of what's happening to the schools. There's a lot more to it. We have changing requirements from the federal government. We have requirements from the state that we have to meet. So I'm not sure our facilities, even if you're looking at just enrollment, I don't think that keeps up with what our buildings need to be able to do to service the students that we have now.
So Kristen, if I could reiterate to make sure I understand you correctly. So what you're saying is, okay, so looking at numbers, i.e., 3-bedroom house is going to have 3 kids or 2 kids, whatever the heck it is. We also need to be looking at the fact that the education by its nature changes.
Yes.
And how we deliver education to children changes. Education is certainly very different than when I was in elementary school. So then the space required, the one-on-one, special ed, whatever. Is that so? Am I hearing you correctly, Kristen? That
Yes.
there are other factors that we're looking at when we're looking at school facilities?
Yes, exactly. And I think just somewhere in there to have this process to check in with somebody on the school side of it, and I don't know where your impact fees come into this either, but what role they would play keeping up with some of the services.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to speak out of for myself here, and anyone else can pipe in. I think our impact fees need to be looked at again. They haven't been looked at in forever.
Yeah.
Am I, Mr. Hall?
Oh, yes. To me, the impact fees are kind of hand in glove, if you will, with managing growth. They intend to identify impact and have the growth pay for that impact on an incremental basis. So they're absolutely essential to be part of this analysis. And some of ours are 30 years old, so there's no question they need to be updated.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just a quick thing for Diane, because I know I've read this thing so many times, so I just know where to go. But within the ordinance, there's certain limitations to its authority. But it's very clearly stated, I think, to address your concern in our current ordinance. The challenge is we're not adhering to it. And here it is. New residential development concern is would outpace the town's capability to expand its schools and other necessary services soon enough to avoid serious school overcrowding and significant reduction in level of quality municipal services. So it's stated very clearly in our growth ordinance. That's what the intent of the ordinance was, to let us keep pace. And you do that by pacing the rate of growth. No town in this state can maintain 300, 400, 500 new homes. I don't care if it's 3-bedroom, 5-bedroom, 1-bedroom, year over year over year. And that's what we've done in the last 5 years. Population of this town has increased 14% in 4 years. Nobody's anti-growth. I love people. Let anybody that wants to come. Okay? But the developers need to develop at the pace that we can absorb and service all residents. The residents have been here for 30 years and the brand new people coming in.
Yeah, and so Ken, that's where we're eventually going to get with this is, so, you know, when we get down to that level is what makes sense, you know, as far as numbers or whatever. That's your detail thing.
Right, you're going to do that in this meeting? I'm impressed.
What's that?
I didn't know you were going to get to that in this meeting. I'm sorry.
No, I'm not.
Oh.
You know that. I'm trying to flesh out what the heck you guys have been talking about. Why not? Now I'm finally getting it. Okay. I'm slow. Thank you.
We're all special in our own little way.
God, it's a good thing I love you. Anyway, sorry, Diane and Kristen. You have to understand the dynamics of the council some days. Okay. All right. Can you stay out of this for a second? Other people, what doesn't work well? Anybody? Karen, I'm going to ask you, what is there anything in this that you don't think works well?
Well, you got to remember that my focus is generally on businesses.
Right.
So I guess I might say there can be a little bit of a disconnect because, you know, we're regulating with the growth management ordinance, you know, the rate of growth, but it doesn't connect it to anything else. And nor can it in, I think, the context, I'll go back to Jay, it can't really be connected to anything else. So, you know, we're stabbing at the pace of growth issue with respect to impacts. So that maybe there's a little bit of expectation that the growth management ordinance can do more than it can do. So that may be part of what's going on. I do think the one thing that I do like about the growth management ordinance is that it does give the council some flexibility to make decisions with respect to contract zones and other things.
Right.
So I think that's good for the council to have that flexibility.
Yeah. Jay, what do you think doesn't work? I'm going to put you right on the spot. Is there anything in this that doesn't work, you think, or needs some?
I think if we're talking about, I guess, if the question's about the mechanics of the ordinance, you know, I think our department has a pretty good handle on how to administer the ordinance itself. I think what Karen was just speaking to, or at least what I interpret what she's speaking to, is the piece that I do think we need to understand better is what are the impacts of the pace of growth that's occurred? Because I think, you know, when we look back at the pace of growth over the time frame of the ordinance, you know, I think if you look at the fact that would typically, you know, have had 135 permits available each year, there were a number of years, and I think, you know, Ken just alluded to, it's really been the last 4 or 5 years that we've certainly gone above that annual 135 number, tapping into the reserve pool, as well as, I think, as Ken will certainly point out, the number of dwelling units has been, you know, with the fractionalization has been above the 135. But I think if you look at the number of units that could have occurred over the time frame, there actually could have been more development that occurred. So I think really what I'm hearing is, you know, we really need to ping back to what are the impacts that we're feeling on the community? And I know that's the type of data and information that we're gathering. So that's not really an answer about what doesn't work about the ordinance.
No,
I think that's really more of a broader context and the issue that the community needs to address itself.
Tom? I know
Yeah,
I'm
I wanted
going
to
with
go
the
back to-
experts here. Go ahead.
While Ken's not here, I want to go back to what I think is working well. No, as you think
You're
back,
cheating.
Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
he's listening. He's just, no, I
He's
think
hiding.
it's interesting. The annual allocation 135, if you look back, and actually, if you compare it to what the statutory limitations are for how much we can manage our growth, it's pretty darn close to where it should be. So I think that's just maybe a point of.
Yeah. Could you reiterate for us what that statutory limitation is? It's under me. I mean,
Yeah,
it can't.
Jay,
That's so fine. I'm putting you on the spot.
I think it's
Anybody here?
I think it's a rolling 5-year average.
Yeah, that's
It's
what I'm
actually a
thinking.
10-year average. It's
10-year average?
10 years, yeah.
And it's remarkably, when you do the math, it's remarkably close to that 135. So just as a data point.
So you can't just pull a number out of your hat, right? Under state statute, is that correct? It's got to
Ken seems
be,
to be
it's
disagreeing.
got to be reasonable. Okay, Ken, you're disagreeing.
No, it just, forgive me, I've heard that fuzzy number many times, because remember, folks, we've been discussing this topic for 12 months this month. Okay, so maybe if you sense a little frustration with me, that's why, because I feel like we just went back to December of 2019, we're having a workshop. You can't do math like that, Tom. You would actually have to take the units, because remember, growth permit in every other town in the state of Maine is 1-to-1. Okay, it's 1-to-1. You have an apartment, it's a growth permit. You have a manufactured home, it's a growth permit. We don't do that here. Okay, so if you take the rolling 10-year average or 5-year average, because that's where the activity is, of units, because units are the result of the fractionalization of the permits, you can back that number back into 135 if you want, say, we're holding state mandates, but we turn that growth permit into something totally different. And that's why units is more valuable. And we had 400 units, 300 units. And again, this year, just to correct Councilor Hamill, we ran out of growth permits this year for the first time ever, and we ran out in October. Okay.
I'm simply making a point. It's not fuzzy math. I'm applying what the statute requires.
That's correct. However, so let's, and then I'll drop it, Jean Marie. If we were to go back to a 1-to-1, which was the original intent of our GMO, and which is what every town in the state of Maine other than Scarborough does, what would your 10-year average be then? Because then that would be units, not growth permits. And to be more realistic, it should be the last 5 years. Because in the last 10 years, we went through a huge downturn and everything, and nobody was having anything. But take a look at the last 5 years and do your math.
So can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a follow-up question of Ken. So Ken, you said we ran out of permits this year. So what developers wanted to build something and couldn't because there were no permits this year?
I'll defer to Jay. I don't think that instance happened, but we did run out of permits.
Well, hang on a minute. So we ran out of permits. We mean we've used them for the year, but if there is no demand, they're not asking because there's no permits. I mean, Jay, how does this
qualify? We ran out of the annual allocation, which is the 135. That doesn't address that hidden bucket that we built into this.
The reserve pool. They just dip into that. So I stand by my statement. We still have enough permits. Maybe, we've exceeded the annual 135, but because of the reserve pool, there are still permits available, right?
Remember,
Well, let Jay answer.
Yeah, so just to be clear, to answer Don's question, the reserve pool, there's only certain projects are eligible for that.
Yeah.
Really, there's sort of 3 criteria. There's a 4th, but it only applies to projects that were in existence prior to the growth management ordinance. So that was 20 years ago. So there's really three ways that folks can tap into the reserve pool. One, through a contract zone process where the council blesses it. Another is where at least 50% of the units meet the
Affordable
town's
housing.
definition for affordability. And the third way is if the project is in a zone that allows for density bonus for affordable housing or the preservation of open space, that project could also be deemed eligible for the reserve pool. So what we saw this year when the reserve, what we've seen, and I mean, this is obviously over the last 3-4 years, there's been a lot of multi-family development occurring. And as we know, or some on this meeting may know, there is a limitation in the ordinance that says, no project can get more than 27 growth permits. It says 20% of the annual allocation. That amounts to 27 units. And so what we see often, what we saw at the end of this year was there was a number of multifamily projects, developments that would require more than 27 in a given year. So developers bought a few in 2019, 20, to be able to then buy a few more in 21, piece those together to build a dwelling under one roof that needed more than 27 growth permits. So I hope that helps answer part of the question. I think there was another question embedded in there somewhere, but I lost it as I was trying to answer that one.
We have a layaway plan for our growth permits. Good.
But so let me, if I just might make a comment to that, the complexity of what Jay has just described, I think, illustrates why it's hard for the average person. And I would not include us as average persons. We spend a fair amount of time on this. And even for us, look how hard it is to verify where are we versus where we should be. So I think that's just, this is a very complicated topic that's become more complicated over time because of some changes that we've made to the ordinance. So it's just, and I know we're going to get our arms around it. We have a pretty good idea of the handful of things that are likely to generate changes, but yeah, it's not, the average person would have a very hard time describing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jay.
Just one final point, and
Sure.
as Councilor Johnson, Ken just referenced it sort of as a layaway plan. The ordinance, basically what the ordinance says is you can purchase a growth permit, and then that growth permit is, you have 6 months until you need to convert that growth permit into a building permit. And I just wanted to make that point clear because as Don said,
I thought I was on mute. When I said that, I'm sorry.
No, but I think it's important for people to understand where we talk about the growth permit, but let's not forget a growth permit ultimately becomes a building. A growth permit in and of itself does not a building make.
And it doesn't mean it's all done in 1 year.
And it doesn't
Well,
mean
it's
it's all
user-
1 year.
yeah, but
and
it-
as we know it doesn't mean it's one unit either, right, Ken?
Well, and yeah, I call it the use or lose provision. You pull it and you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So anyway.
Can I just finalize
Yeah,
my
go ahead,
thought?
Tom.
Yeah, just things that need to be changed. Jay alluded to it. There's some gamesmanship with this. No one subdivision gets more than 27 growth permits. The developers have found creative ways around that by doing multiple subdivisions. So it just qualifies. So we need to tighten that up, I think. And then just generally, it's just too complicated, as has been mentioned countless times.
Right. I know why I marked that on my thing saying, should it just be to developer? That was my thought. Developers won't be happy with me. Kristen and then Karen.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. As you are pulling some of this data together to look at your ordinance, will you be, I know that Diane has provided you with all the addresses of the students. Are you going to actually look will we see numbers on where students are coming from, like by development? Will we know how these fractionalized units might be affecting the population?
That's the point of the exercise. We'll tie the student to the dwelling type.
So we will see down to that, like a fractionalized unit, like we thought they wouldn't have any students, they actually have this many.
Right.
Will that all be in there?
Just to be clear, and we'll have to take a look at how closely we can parse it, but it's really going to be sort of more project by project, if you will. So we'll know, just use an example of the Carrier Woods off of Muzzy Road, which has been in place for a number of, there's 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms in there. So we'll be able to know not based, per 2 bedroom and per 1 bedroom, but we'll know as an aggregate of that development and as an aggregate of other developments. So we can start to get pretty good generalized, numbers. So.
Awesome, thank you.
Good approach.
Yeah, I see that it's being real helpful for us, for the school department and for us as a town too, so we know more about what we're talking about.
We're also
with
looking,
what-
we're looking at a little more challenging. We're trying to do a similar analysis for other impacts, namely public safety. And traffic is a bit of a vexing challenge, but we appreciate that's another one that needs to be factored into that analysis as well.
And traffic's so weird because not all traffic's in it, it's going through us. It's not originating here and it's not ending here. It's going through Scarborough too. So because of what other town, Gorham's an example. Gorham's going through a ton of growth right now. So anyway, that being said, all right, the last thing I had is just kind of a wrap up type of question. Was anything else that we should look at? And then I'll tell you what I'm hearing, and some of it's pretty loud and clear from Mr. Johnson. Anything else from anybody? Karen.
I just, at the wrath of getting Ken mad at me.
Uh-oh, don't do that, please.
I don't want you to be mad at me, but
That's my job tonight.
There you go. There you go. Well, I do think this is when I talked about sometimes there's a disconnect between the things that the growth management ordinance can do and how it can, and what the impacts are. I do think that's where the fractionalized units come in, because the theory was there is less of an impact with some of the fractionalized units. And I think that's where some of our research, obviously needs to focus to understand how much. I think fractionalized units probably make sense. We may not have the ratios right, and we may have an overly complex ratio. But if we're talking about impacts, we definitely need to, to understand that.
I would just say, Jean Marie, subject to this analysis, but the GMO doesn't differentiate other than fractionalization between different types of growth. And I guess it's too early to say that if we favor one over another, and I'm talking residential only.
Yeah.
I fear that might complicate it further, frankly, but that analysis, understanding type and impact, I think is going to be really important to help educate and inform this discussion and ultimately what you do. And the other thing that I would just mention is the impact fees. It was mentioned earlier, but I think that's a piece that we need to, it needs to come right on the heels of the growth management ordinance. I think they're so connected that we need to be right on top of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Anyone else on this, Jay?
Yeah, I just want to jump on this sort of differential of growth, because certainly it has been stated, all of this is governed out of what the state statute allows us to do. And so just so we're all sort of clear on, currently the ordinance does have a differential in terms of location in the community. Essentially, there's a limitation on the number of growth permits that can be permitted in what the town sort of designated our low growth area. Think west of the turnpike, if you will, for just sort of ease. You're allowed to create that type of differential based on growth areas. We'll need to think more critically about how we get at the notion that Tom was talking about, the types of growth, right? Because I think one of the things that fractionalization has enabled has been the diversity of housing choice. But now how we get there and the pace that we get there, that's the critical piece that we need to think about. I think that's the issue that I'm hearing. I think we're all hearing. That's what I'm taking.
Diane, did I see you with your,
I just, again, appreciate being involved in the conversation today. And I also just want to add that I think it's a great exercise that Jay is doing to take a look at, where current students live in relationship to the community. But I would just also remind all of us the constraints of doing that really are, that is the snapshot of today. It does not tell us anything about the students that we haven't seen yet. And so I think we really have to pay attention to that. And then the second piece that I would just add is just remind us that we want to continue to look at the relationship between the number of GMOs and then how we resource that up, especially as we begin conversations about budgets, right? And so there are conversations about budgets and the need for greater resources. We have to be able to tie that back in to the decisions that are being made in relationship to these types of growth permits.
Yep. Good points. Good points. Dawn.
Yeah, I had a question. I was thinking about the comment that Ken made about growth, and what have we grown? Something like 14% or something like that, Ken. What was it over the past 5 years in terms of just population in Scarborough? Whatever that figure is. Do we ever try to compare that to the housing stock, or the number of, residences or dwellings that we have? And maybe that's a question for Karen and the Sedco crowd, but it does seem to me.
Karen's nodding.
You know what I mean? Because it's sort of like, if we're in a big boom, if we build a lot of stuff, then people will come. But then there's also an issue of, people moving up through existing stock and so forth. So I don't, that to me is another thing. We don't really have assumptions around growth in terms of what we think we should have in terms of development. I get the feeling that it's demand driven. We're trying to accommodate, we're trying to build as much as we can. And I just don't, I have no data for that, but that's my impression that, but it does seem to me that, it's going to be important for us to answer questions like that and to start with the data, start with the analysis, and then try to draw conclusions about what's happening and compare that to what we think we want. Maybe it's on track, maybe it's not. I think there's a general feeling that we're out of sync. But I think this has been a good initial discussion, but I think it's got to really start from drawing conclusions around what the data is telling us and what our assumptions are. So.
And I just want to say that what helps Jay and I is really being able to tie the data and the components of change, because that's really part of it. The same number of people from year to year may have different demands on services depending on where we are in our age cohorts. So we've got that, but understanding what the policy is that the council would like to move forward with. I mean, is housing diversity important? What are those things that are important so we can gear make sure we're pulling the information that matches that. So that's critically important there.
Mm-hmm. I've been scratching things down here as we go along, and one of the things that I had highlighted for myself that's I'll call it hot button for no other reason is fractionalization. Obviously, seems to be, or there's some feeling that's causing issues, or it potentially is a source of issues, and we need to look at that. I definitely have said that myself. Let's look at what fractionalization is and what it means, and how it's contributing to the problems. And then, Dawn, I'm going to use one of your terms. We're too far over our skis, perhaps, with development. I mean, are we? Aren't we? It's an interesting thing to think about. And let me find, outstripping infrastructure was the wording that I believe, and it was either Den or Den. That's you and Dawn combined, Ken. Den. Ken and Dawn. I mentioned that you know, that is what causes people angst, I think, is are we or are we not outstripping infrastructure? Interesting concept. I'm just going to throw something out here. This is just Jean Marie speaking, so take it from what it's worth. I have to say, I just roll my eyes about when did kids in school become a bad thing? Because some of that drives what some portions of this town, people in this town are like, we can't be, you know, building schools and it's like, I don't know when that became a bad thing, but anyway, that's my Jean Marie's own bias in here. But I also you got to balance it, because my job as a counselor is to maintain tax stability. You know, we can't have taxes shooting through the roof all of a sudden. That's not right or fair. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. Where do we go from here? What do you guys want to do? I'm looking at my fellow 2 counselors.
Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm socializing recommendations to the town council to bring forward to make changes to the GMO.
Oh, you are?
Yep.
All right, run them past us first.
Yeah, we'll have a discussion.
Okay.
So I think Ken is probably one of the top 5 people in the entire town who really do, understand the GMO and how it works and how we got where we are to this point. I think he has a good idea of the sort of data that we need to look at to confirm what we, verify what we think is happening. And then I think that leads him to, he's already there in terms of, and I'm pretty, not very far behind him in terms of the 2 or 3 things that we think were the dials that we twisted that got us to where we are, that we can try to adjust. The trick, I think, is for us to help socialize that and get a broad base of support behind that, so that people will agree, confirm, validate, and help us implement it. I'm concerned that if we run too quickly with what we think is right, two of us, or in the council, or 2 or 3 of us, we're going to lose. We run the risk of losing people, and I think there's a risk of there being a reaction to something if we don't get the immediate results, that we think we're going to get by making changes. So I get.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, could you define socialize for me? I've heard that both from, and to me that means so many things. I'm not sure what you guys mean by
no, just a discussion. Again, I think this conversation brought it. Growth is a very large topic. Okay, it really is, and GMO doesn't address impact fees. That was not the charge from the town council. Charge of the town council was very simple. The GMO's purpose in the statement and defined by the state of Maine is to manage the pace of growth. We don't care what kind of growth. We don't care where you put the growth. We don't care who's in the growth. We don't care. It's the pace of the growth. And to get back to everybody's concerns, if you looked at the purpose, and in the 2006 comp plan specifically states, manage the growth so it doesn't outpace our schools and municipal services. And we haven't done that. And if
so to go back to my original thing, when you say social,
we don't need to do that analysis, Jean Marie.
No. But what are you talking about when you say socialize? Are you talking about?
I have very clear thoughts about what I think, because remember what I started out saying, growth is very large. This task was not to solve the whole growth issue. It was to look at the pace of growth. That's the charge from the town council.
But you said you were going to socialize. I'm going to keep picking on you until I get an answer. The socialize. When you're saying socialize the town council, you're talking about doing a workshop with the whole council. Are you talking about Facebook? Are you talking about phone call? What are you talking about here?
Phone calls. That's all.
Getting on the phone. Okay. Phew, I got that out of him. Dawn, what are you talking about?
I might be to blame for the socialize comment. To me, that means just building understanding and support for issues and recommendations. And I think that, Ken off the top of his head can tell you the analysis that we we have and we can use to say this is what's happened. I'd like to use as the example, we had an assumption that Beacon at Gateway was driving the spike in enrollments that we had in K through 3 or whatever, a year or so ago, 2 years
Right.
now maybe. And guess what? That wasn't the reason for it. There was a very limited school enrollment. It was the migration of people within existing housing stock within the town.
It was my fault.
But we need to go through that to verify and confirm this is what's happened, and then point to the things that Ken is saying. We have 2 or 3 things we can do, and here's why we think we need to do them, and here's what we expect them to do for us.
So what's our next? So what's our next step? That's my thing. What's our next
maybe
step?
discuss at a committee meeting to come up with another workshop.
Okay.
But in the takeaway, and I want to thank everybody coming and giving their input.
Yeah.
And Karen, you never make me mad. I'm sorry. I'm just very passionate about certain things, and believe me, I'm passionate about this, and so are many thousands of our residents. Also, keep this in mind. Again, I don't know of one counselor that cares about where the growth is, what type of growth is, or who because. And I'm saying that is because we're getting that thrown. It looks like we're phobic about some type, and that's not the case. But with the Downs, which I can spit to the Downs from my neighborhood, and I 100% support the Downs. I think it's a great project. A lot of growth going on in there. That's fine. They're playing by the rules of the permits. But keep in mind, that's at a 40% discounted tax rate. When we do things like that too, that actually even exacerbates additional dwellings in the town that aren't paying their fair share. But they are, but it's going back, and we understand that. But that's a topic of a different story.
I was going to say, you're going down a different
But
alley
remember
there,
then,
and I don't need to do
we don't
that.
make money on any house coming in anyway, and we do have a large section that's being developed at a discounted rate. So all that means is another reason to really concentrate on the pace of the growth. That's all.
Well,
Just so we can
I
catch
want
up.
to wrap.
Let's catch
Okay.
up.
I want to wrap this up because I want to be mindful of people's times and commitments, because we have a couple of folks who need to go to another meeting. God love you.
Jim Ray, the only thing I'd
Tom.
remind you of is just there's a key stakeholder group, the developer community at some point needs to be brought
I was
in.
just going to talk about that.
I don't know exactly when that is the right time. I mean, it could be argued that it's best to get their input early. The other hand would be, it'd be maybe ideal to have at least some inkling of an idea of the areas that are up for change.
Good idea.
I was going to suggest that we do because we had tentatively said the 21st, which is the regular ordinance meeting date and time, which is 2 weeks from tonight, just to invite some of the developers, and I would give them the same questions. I'd be interested in hearing what their reactions are, or similar questions without. Go ahead.
The other thing you could do is, I don't know what it was, I think earlier in the spring, you sent a number of very pointed questions to the Long Range Planning Committee for their review and comment.
Yeah.
Those might be helpful to send to the developer community as well, and say those are discussion points. Those are still open. I think you'll find better input if you prompt them and say this is the input we want.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I would definitely give them a structured type of thing.
And possibly if they could, if they have a sense of maybe a 3-year plan, nothing elaborate. I don't mean an engineered plan. What are their thoughts? What do they see within their, because we have very few, what I call developers in town. We got about 4 major players. So if they're coming, just ask them, bring us your thoughts for the next 3 years. What are you thinking?
So guys, do you want to do that the 21st? Because Dawn and Ken, you would be there. Yeah. All right, let's do this. Karen, I know I had talked to you about and putting an invite out and telling him something will be following. What I will do is I will work with Tom and then run it quickly by Ken and Dawn on what will be going out to the developers for questions. Is that okay? And get that done by Monday? So that Tom's making, all right,
No.
Tuesday. No,
No, just share the questions with
Yes.
the committee.
I think
Yeah.
you have that work done, really.
yeah, but I just want to make sure we're on track. Is everyone all set? Are we good? I would say that we can wrap up this workshop. I really appreciate everyone's time and input. I find it very helpful to hear different viewpoints. And I think I absolutely agree with, I believe it was Kristen who said, yeah, you know, it's great we need to have the school board involved. And I think with some of these topics we do, because they're intertwined. They're so intertwined. Yeah, Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, to your point, thank you so much for including us.
Oh
This
yeah, no.
really beneficial for us too to hear your process behind all.
Right. I do think that it helps in the long run with that. That being said, I would say everyone can go home now, except for the school board people who have to go to school board meetings. Sorry.
Do we have to adjourn?
We are adjourned. How's that?
Good.
Thanks.
Good, he says. Good. Bye, everybody.
Good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.